Minutes past the hour. So we're going to go ahead and dive in and let folks join us as they can. So I am so excited today to introduce Dr. Annie Valuska, pet behaviorist for Purina. Dr. Annie brings more than 2 decades of experience in animal behavior to her role as Purina's pet behavior team. Before joining Purina, she received a PhD in animal behavior from UC Davis and then went on to serve as the postdoctoral behavior research fellow at Disney's Animal Kingdom. You can find her now on TikTok and Instagram at her handle, Annie Knows Animals. We're so very excited to have her with us today. So, Dr. Annie, please take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. As Danielle mentioned, pretty packed agenda, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to start very quickly level setting on what an animal behaviorist is and why you should be listening to me. Then we'll go over the relationship between domestic violence and pets. We'll do a quick kind of dog 101 and a deep dive on their body language, do the same thing for cats. Then we'll talk in more detail about the impact of stress on pets, how it manifests and what we can do about it. And then there should be a few minutes left for Q&A. But I have already agreed to do a second session. So if you have questions that we didn't get answered this time around, or if there's any topics that I touch on that you'd like a deeper dive on, please put that in the chat and we can use that to inform what I'll talk about next time. So as you know, I am an animal behaviorist, and I think for the average person, and even some people close to the field, they don't really know what that means. So my friends are convinced that because I work with animals, I just get to play with puppies and kittens all day. Some days that's true, but that's definitely not my typical day job. After 20 years in the field, I've managed to convince my parents that I am a scientist and not a veterinarian. But a lot of people think that animal behaviorists and vets are the same thing. I'm not a vet, I'm a scientist. And I think the average person, when I say that I'm a behaviorist, they assume that I'm a dog trainer. And there was also a rumor on TikTok last month that I was a pet psychic. That is not true. So I have been trained to ask and answer questions about what animals do and why they're doing that. So at Purina, my job specifically is to understand really what cats and dogs need and how they experience the world, and then translate that knowledge for people that are interested in putting it into practice. So I've applied that lens today, and I'll be sharing some stuff that will hopefully be helpful to those of you that are in positions to aid pets that come into your care. Unfortunately, many of you are getting to meet these pets because they've been through some challenging circumstances. So let's jump right into that. I know all of you have tremendous empathy for the human survivors of domestic violence and what they've been through. And unfortunately, it's likely that pets have been through extremely similar circumstances. One study found that particularly cats and dogs were the most likely to be abused. This could be due to their smaller size, which made them more vulnerable, and their ease of access because they are present in the home. But primarily, it's likely due to their increasing incorporation in the family unit, thus ensnaring them within the family violence sphere. And this topic is going to come up several times throughout. It's the fact that we have such strong bonds with these animals that enables them to be so harmed by this domestic abuse and also by the stress that their owners are experiencing. But that bond is also going to be the way to get them feeling better again. So both sides of the leash are really important here. Unfortunately, this common abuse of pets in these abusive family situations is an extremely effective and commonly used tactic by abusers. And nearly 3/4 of women that are in shelters escaping violent partners reported that their abuser did target the pets, either for revenge or to increase that psychological control. And as I just mentioned, even in cases where the pet is not a direct victim of abuse, studies that I'll talk a little bit about have shown that both dogs and cats are extremely responsive to human emotions, both in terms of our vocal cues, our facial expressions, and even our odor changes when we're experiencing stress. So it's highly likely that even if the pet hasn't been directly targeted by the abuser, the stress experienced by the pet owner can have a real highly negative impact on those pets. I got several questions submitted ahead of this talk about how to recognize pets that have been abused. And so this list is really intended for veterinary professionals or others who are interacting directly with the pets. So it's going to be a history of unexplained injuries, particularly rib injuries are very common. It may be accompanied by other indicators of poor welfare, like a low body weight or low body condition score. Unfortunately, the most common injuries associated with domestic abuse are poisoning, burns, bruising, stab wounds, and also gunshot wounds. So those should raise a red flag. Fractures, particularly if they're across multiple regions of the body and are at different stages of healing, is a common indicator. And the animal may be displaying fear either of its owner or of people in general. So those are some common injuries and behaviors in the pets, but it can also be recognized due to behavior changes in the client. So the client may be giving inconsistent stories about how the pet received that injury. They may not agree with the story that other family members are telling about what happened to the pet. The client may seem indifferent to the animal's injuries and not terribly concerned with following up on the treatment or the additional appointments that may be required. They may seem not to have a very strong emotional attachment to the animal. They may have had a significant delay in seeking medical attention, and you may start to see some of that aggression or argumentativeness in the interaction with the client. And you may, in addition to seeing the pet be fearful of this person, you may see other family members be fearful of them as well. And at least one study has reported that in general, clinicians and veterinarians found that the owner behavior in the clinic was more indicative of determining abuse or non-accidental injury than the pet behavior. So this is not my area of expertise. Like I said, I'm not a veterinarian, but there is some data out there. And so I wanted to make sure that I shared that with you guys. Hopefully you find this useful. And unfortunately, for pets that are abused, they are affected by that abuse in very similar ways to the human survivors. And we'll talk more later about how that kind of trauma shows up in pets. But all of you are here now because you are in a position to be helping those pets. And I know that some of you or your staff or your residents may not be totally comfortable with being in that position, may not be totally comfortable with having that much interaction with pets. So I want to start by going over Dogs and Cats 101, really talking about their body language with the goal of empowering you to feel more confident in your interactions with your pet residents. So we will start with dogs. And these are just the top 3 things that I wish more people understood about dogs. I think it can really change the way that we see them. So the leading theory about dog domestication right now is that they essentially domesticated themselves. That humans had a lot of resources, which is to say food, that dogs' ancestors wanted. And a few of those proto-dogs were bold enough or sociable enough to approach people to get that food. And necessarily a few of our human ancestors allowed that or maybe even encouraged that to happen. And so those proto-dogs benefited by getting those additional resources. So they were able to survive longer and produce more puppies, some of which would have also carried those sociable genes, which they then passed on to their offspring. And over many generations, you end up with the domesticated dog. And this particular dog is my dog, Arya. And domestication is kind of a wild genetic process that results in a lot of cool changes, including physical changes like a spotted coat, floppy ears, and a curled tail. You see that across many domesticated species. These are neotenic traits, which mean they look like young animals into adulthood. And also, there are some behavioral changes, like a reduced fear response to people and play behavior that persists into adulthood. And as I said, those changes carry over across all domesticated species. So rabbits, cows, pigs, dogs, all of them have the changes that I just described. And dogs have some additional changes that I think are really cool, and I think also give us a lot of insight into how our relationship with them developed. First, when compared to wolves, so their nearest living relative, dogs are much better able to digest carbohydrates than wolves are. There's a change that scientists identified at the genetic level that altered their digestive system. And this makes sense, right? Humans, we love our carbs, and proto-dogs were eating our food, so it would be a big advantage to them to be able to digest carbohydrates. And I mention this because this ability really reinforces that leading theory about how dogs and humans first came into contact. So don't underestimate the importance of food when it comes to changing dog behavior or bonding with your dog. The second really cool difference between wolves and dogs is that dogs have, as far as we know right now, really an unmatched ability to communicate with humans. On the dog side, they have a few incredibly well-developed muscles compared to wolves, and those are the muscles that can move their eyebrows up and down. This allows them to make that classic puppy dog expression that Arya is displaying in this photo. And it also allows them to widen their eyes so that you can see the white, which looks more like a human eye. And that might not sound like that big of a deal. Okay, they can move their eyes around. But one study that asked people to rate how adoptable shelter dogs were found the dogs that were making that puppy dog expression were rated as more adoptable than dogs that didn't make that expression. So this seemingly minor change has absolutely has an impact on us, how we perceive those dogs and ultimately our relationship with them. Dogs are also seemingly innately capable of following our gaze, so where we're looking, and also understanding a pointing gesture. And again, this might not seem like such a big deal, but this is an ability that even our closest living relative, the chimpanzee, cannot master. And wolves can only master it if they have extensive training, and even then, they're not nearly as good at it as dogs are. So they are really paying attention to us and what we're looking at and what we're paying attention to. Dogs have also tapped into our oxytocin loop. So oxytocin is also known as the cuddle hormone, and it's released when mom holds her newborn baby, or when two people who are in love look into each other's eyes, or when a dog and a person look into each other's eyes. And not only is oxytocin released in us when we're looking at our beloved dogs, but it is released in the dog as well. So those warm, fuzzy feelings that we're experiencing may be experienced on the dog side as well, which I think is really great. So hopefully, as I'm sharing all these things, I'm painting a compelling picture that science backs up what every dog parent already knows. We have got something really special happening here when it comes to our bond with these animals. And the third thing that I wish more people understood about dogs is just how incredible and how important their sense of smell is. To give you a sense of this, and it's hard for us to wrap our heads around, we're not very good when it comes to olfaction. But puppies, a newborn puppy is kind of like a little potato. Their eyes are closed, their ears are closed, they can't move around, they can't do anything, but they can smell just a few hours after birth. So again, much more important to that dog than vision or hearing is their ability to smell. We also know that dogs knock us out of the park when it comes to their olfactory capabilities. They have about 300 million olfactory receptors. We have about 5 million. What that means is that if dogs could taste as well as they could smell, they could sense a teaspoon of sugar in 2 Olympic swimming pools, whereas humans could sense it in a cup of coffee. So that's insane. And another thing about dog noses is that they don't adapt to smells the way that human noses do. Our noses, you smell something and often enough, you're going to get used to it. When I was working in the zoo, the zookeepers told me, when you go into the elephant enclosure, just take 2 deep breaths and it won't smell so bad anymore because our noses adjust. Dogs' noses don't do that. In the same way that we look out the window and that tree is always there, it's there every time we look, no matter how long we stare at it, that's how dogs perceive smells. And I mention that here because I think a lot of people, when they're using cleaning supplies or scented candles and that kind of thing, underestimate the impact on the dog. And they also underestimate how good it can be for the dog to get the opportunity to use their noses. And I'll share some ideas for how to do that later in the talk. Okay, so that's dog 101. Now let's get into the nuts and bolts and talk about canine body language. Even though most dog owners believe that they are very good at reading their dog's body language, study after study, and this is just one of them, but there are many, have found that this is not actually true. And in this particular study that I'm showing you, non-dog owners were significantly better at classifying the dog's emotional state than dog owners were. This was particularly true when it came to identifying dogs showing fear and anxiety during an interaction with a child. This is a pretty important time to be able to accurately read a dog's body language. And But dog owners were not very good at doing that. And the authors of this study ultimately concluded that experience with a dog, so having owned a dog for several years or your entire life, gives people confidence in their ability, but without the theoretical knowledge to back it up, that confidence is actually a detriment when it comes to reading dog body language. So the goal today is to provide you with some of that theoretical knowledge and hopefully improve your abilities and your confidence. So we'll start with submissive signals, and these examples are going to be passive submission. So passive submission is often an behavioral indicator that the dog is feeling anxious or uncomfortable in the environment. So they're likely going to be avoiding eye contact. You're going to be seeing a lot of tension. If you remember nothing else about this, it's that tension is generally bad. It means that the dog is not feeling very good about something. So tension in the eyes, the ears, the face, the body. You'll often see these dogs trying to look as small as possible. So they might be low to the ground. Their head will be below the plane of their back. That tail might be tucked under. So again, tense and trying to get small. You may see them baring their teeth, but if they're baring their teeth with their eyes closed, this is a submissive signal. I think it's pretty common to see this facial expression in videos of dogs that have gotten into the garbage or destroyed a pillow while the owner was gone, and this is played for laughs. The video is as if the dog is grinning about what they got away with, but this is actually a sign of fear. It's likely the dog anticipating being punished, and they're trying to stave that off and appease their owner. So this is, again, a sign that a dog is not feeling very good about the situation. They may roll over to show their stomachs. This can be a submissive posture. A lot of people assume that this means the dog wants belly rubs, but take it in context. If you're seeing a dog on its back with all of that tension, that is probably a dog that's asking for space, not asking for more pets. And another key indicator of this is something called whale eye. So this is when the dogs use those developed muscles to hold their eyes open really wide until you can see the whites. This is also a sign that a dog is feeling uncomfortable. Other signs that a dog isn't feeling great can include excessive yawning, excessive panting, standing with one paw lifted, shivering, and lip licking. So if you see these kinds of behaviors in a dog, that's, again, a sign that the dog isn't very comfortable in that situation, and you should be trying to remove the dog from that situation so that they feel more comfortable. There's another form of submission that is active submission. So we just talked about passive. Active submission. So passive submission is the dog basically trying not to be perceived. I just want out of this environment. Active submission is more like the dog trying to get your attention to prove how happy they are, how friendly they are, how much they want you to pay attention to them. So here they still might not be making eye contact. This is a bit of a stronger signal in dogs. We'll talk about that in a bit. But in general, you're going to see much looser, relaxed body language. So whereas that stress signal is small and tense, these dogs are going to be taking up space. They're going to be bouncy. You're going to see nice floppy ears and tails. That tail might be wagging, but a wagging tail is not always a sign of a happy dog. So let's talk a little bit more about that tail wag. So one of the most common dog myths is that a wagging tail means a happy dog. In fact, all a wagging tail indicates is that something has that dog's attention. To determine whether the dog is happy about whatever has its attention requires paying attention to the dog's other body language. So let's look at a few examples. This first clip is a happy dog. This is classic active submission. Look at how loose and floppy everything is. That tail is low and big, sweeping wags. The whole butt is wagging. This is a happy, relaxed dog. The eyes are nice and soft. The ears are soft. Again, those tail wags are low and sweeping. If you see this dog, this is a dog that is safe and would be happy to have you approach. Compare that to this video after this ad. So in this video, you can see that there is a lot more tension in the dog's body. Those ears are up. That posture is very stiff. The tail is not low and sweeping. It is high over the dog's back, and it is a very stiff, short wag. This kind of wagging is actually called flagging. Again, the rest of the dog's body, very tense, and that dog is making very hard eye contact with the dog that it's looking at. You may have noticed the muzzle there. So this kind of wagging tail with that tension and that level of interest and being held so stiffly over the body is a sign of a dog that would likely react poorly if it was given access to another dog. It may be aggressive, might be reactive, but this is not a friendly dog just because that tail is wagging. So almost no body language indicator can give you the definite answer in isolation. You always need to be taking into account everything that the dog is doing and all of those context clues to determine how they're really feeling about it. So again, loose, soft, that's good, safe to approach. Stiff, tense, small, probably not a good idea. Another common dog behavior it's important to recognize is play. And play can often look and sound a lot like aggression. So the key to distinguishing play is that the winner should shift often. It shouldn't be just one dog relentlessly chasing another dog. They should be going back and forth. Same thing if they're kind of wrestling. One dog should be on top for a while and then it should switch so that the other dog is on top. And you'll often see breaks in the action while the dogs seemingly just stop in the middle of it to scratch and itch. They might be sneezing, they might do a full body shake, and then they'll get right into it. If it's a real fight, they're not going to take a break like that. So switches in the action, random breaks before they get back into it. You'll often see them kind of check with each other before they get back into it again, like, are you still enjoying this? And they also use what's called a meta signal. So one of those is the play bow. This is depicted in this photo. That butt is up, the forepaws are down, and this is a sign that says everything that I'm about to do after this is play, like JK, we're just messing around. And another meta signal is this raised paw. So if they are picking their paw up and putting it on the other dog or kind of pawing at them, that is often an indicator that they want to play as well. So these can be useful to look for if you're not sure whether two dogs are at risk of a fight or if they're just goofing off. Now, it is important to be able to recognize when tensions may be escalating through some of these more dominant or aggressive signals, but tensions can also escalate if a dog is showing some of those passive submission signals that I showed you before, where they're getting more and more uncomfortable. If the other dog isn't backing off, that can also lead to a fight. So you want to keep an eye out for those, and you want to keep an eye out for these. So as I mentioned, they will be making hard, direct eye contact. This is pretty rude in dog body language, so this is a sign that things might not be going well. If that eye contact is accompanied by bared teeth, that is also an escalation, whereas that closed eye and bared teeth was a submissive signal. Open eyes and bared teeth is aggression, especially if it's accompanied by vocalizations like growling or barking. Again, lots of tension in the face and body, but whereas submissive dogs have tension and they're trying to look as small as possible, more aggressive or dominant dogs are tense and they are trying to look as big as possible. So you might see the fur along the back of their neck all the way down to their tail standing on end. They might literally be on their tippy toes, kind of leaning forward like this dog is. That tail is likely to be over their back. They're trying to look as big as they possibly can. You may also, if you see any of these behaviors, it's important to try to, again, de-escalate, remove them from the situation that is causing this, and try to get them to calm down. It is very important never to punish this kind of behavior. When you punish warnings and normal dog communication, what people think they're punishing is they think they're telling the dog, it is not okay for you to feel this way. You shouldn't be growling because the kid is too close to you. That is an inappropriate response and you shouldn't be doing that. What you're actually teaching the dog is that it's not appropriate to warn them. If you want to change the way the dog feels about the situation, that's a process called counter conditioning. We'll talk a little bit about that. But if you just punish the behavior, all you're doing is changing the warning behavior. And so dogs who have been punished for growling or air snapping, those are dogs that stop growling and instead escalate straight to a bite in the future. So all of the behavior I've covered is normal, appropriate dog communication. Your role is to advocate for the dog and get them out of the situation that's causing the behavior, but you never ever want to punish any of these behaviors. And a final note about canine communication is that many human modifications, either through breeding or grooming or cosmetic procedures, have affected dogs' abilities to communicate with us and with other dogs, either by limiting the signals that they can give because their ears are too floppy or their tail has been docked, or affecting their ability to see other dogs' signals because they can't see through their eyebrows or hear as well through those ears or anything else. So take extra care when interacting with dogs that are not able to signal as well as your average dog. All right, that was a quick run through of canine body language. It is time for a pop quiz. So I'm going to show you 3 videos. They preclude either an aggressive interaction, a neutral interaction, or a playful interaction. I want you to guess which is which. So here's our first video. After this video stopped, are the dogs neutral? Do they play or do they fight? Play it one more time. So those of you that said play were correct. These dogs are super loose. You could see nice relaxed body language. We even saw that shake off that I talked about that can happen during breaks. They're interested in each other. There's no tension there. There's no aggression. After this video ended, these dogs got back into playing with each other. Here's the second clip. Play it again. So this one preceded a neutral interaction. Those dogs pretty much kept ignoring each other. This one trips people up because they're expecting a conflict over the bowl, the water bowl. But these dogs do not have a lot of tension in their body language. They're not really interacting with each other. This was a neutral interaction. And the last one more time. So this one preceded aggression, and it's a little tricky because that black dog did do a play bow. The black dog was trying to play, but he was very rude about it. That face barking behavior is not polite in dog communication, and that border collie was communicating very clearly that he was not happy about that. So you can see there was a lot of tension in his body. His tail was over his back. He turned and started making direct eye contact, and then at the very end, you can see he actually bares his teeth before he goes after the black dog. So not appropriate canine communication. An owner seeing that, either dog's owner, should have intervened before it got to that point. Okay, now we've conquered dog-dog communication in those videos, so let's up the challenge a little bit. I'm going to show you some of the most popular dog videos on the internet last year, and I want you to tell me if you think the dogs in these videos look comfortable and happy. Okay, now if you said you thought the dogs were calm or even happy, you wouldn't be alone. As I shared earlier, people aren't great at interpreting canine behavior, especially when kids are involved. And these videos are interesting because the clues about how the dogs are feeling are coming in the form of calming signals or appeasement behavior, like we talked about with passive submission. They generally indicate that a dog is feeling stressed and is asking for space. And some of those behaviors include turning their head away, hard blinking, lip or nose licking, freezing, yawning, licking the person, pinning their ears back, panting, biting, growling, and barking. So it's important to keep in mind that if a dog is stressed, you will almost never see just one of these in isolation. Dogs are going to be displaying several of these, plus some of the other body language that we've talked about already. But because many of them are so subtle and so quick, it's good to keep the entire list in mind so that you don't miss anything. And in case you haven't guessed, all 3 of those videos showed dogs displaying calming signals. And in fact, in this study, which surveyed hundreds of the most popular videos showing dogs and people interacting, the majority of the videos showed stress behavior. And the study noted that instead of responding appropriately to the dog's requests for space and understanding that they're scared or confused, people usually find these calming signals funny or even indicative of dog enjoyment. And dogs were significantly more likely to be displaying stress behaviors in videos with children, which is consistent with prior research showing that children are more likely to be the victims of dog bites than adults. And prior to being bitten, children were reported to have been engaging in behaviors that included petting, hugging, kissing, stepping on, pulling on, hitting, and interfering with a resting dog. So again, the pet owner's space here is to advocate for the dog and remove the dog from that situation when they start to see these calming signals. And in fact, the study concluded, quote, "Our studies show a lack of awareness of the meaning or interpretation of canine signaling and communicative behaviors. Humans need to understand and recognize communication exhibited by their dogs, to respect it, respond appropriately, and to respect agency in human-dog interactions." So with that directive in mind, I'm going to show you those videos again, this time highlighting the calming signals the dogs are giving, indicating that they're uncomfortable with the interactions. See how many you could spot. And in many of those videos, the dog is even making eye contact with the person behind the phone, presumably their owner, the adult in the room. And that may be a dog's way to request a little bit of help in those situations. But again, don't punish any of these signals. The appropriate course of action is just to give the dog some space. All right, that was lightning round on dogs. Let's move on to cats. So again, I'm going to go over the top 3 things I wish more people knew about cats before we get into the body language. So one of the big ones, number 1 with a bullet, is that even though cats are the ultimate murder machines, they're also prey themselves. So they have this suite of behavioral responses that kicks in when they sense that they're in danger. And humans can look dangerous to them because we're large and we have forward-facing eyes, like most terrestrial predators do. And so the fact that cats are mesopredators, middle of the food chain, have these prey behaviors, impacts their litter box behavior, because going to the bathroom is a dangerous time for them. If they don't feel safe, they're going to pick somewhere else to do it besides the litter box. It can affect their preferences for where and how they're fed. Same principle, eating is kind of a vulnerable time. And their preferred resting spots. That's why cats love a kitchen counter, because it's up high. They can survey the action without having to be a part of the action. They feel very safe up there. And it also means that their social behavior is a lot more subtle than dogs are. They're not, humans find it more difficult to read cats than dogs. We'll get into that in a second. The second thing that's important to know about cats is that, yes, they are the ultimate predator. They are obligate carnivores. So they evolved to eat only prey animals. And this has a lot of trickle-down effects on their behavior. That's part of the reason it can be a struggle to get them to drink water, for example. They're used to all their water coming from their food. And this is also why they tend to eat many small meals per day rather than consuming all of their food at once like a dog will if given the opportunity. They are also used to having to spend a big portion of their day, in terms of the time and the energy, engaged in hunting. And when people bring cats into their homes and feed them out of a bowl and don't replace that hunting experience with play or something else, that can cause a lot of behavioral problems, like attention seeking and out-of-box elimination and all kinds of different things, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the talk. And then finally, cats really do not get enough credit for how socially attuned and bonded they are to humans. I know I talked about how amazing dogs are. I think cats are almost as bonded to us as dogs are, and the science just hasn't caught up to proving it because they are a little bit more difficult to study. But there have been some really cool studies done that are supporting this narrative. So the first used what's called a free operant assessment. So they gave cats the opportunity to spend time in areas where they would have a favorite toy. One area had a favorite treat. One area had some olfactory enrichment. I think it was the smell of a prey item or maybe catnip. And one area had their human. And they found that social interaction with their person was the most preferred stimulus category for cats, even above food. So they clearly are motivated to spend time with us. Cats also react differently to their owners depending on whether the owner is smiling or frowning. So they pay attention to our facial expressions and they change their behavior in response to whether we're happy about something or not. So they clearly care about what's going on with us. And also studies have found that most cats form a secure bond with their owners, which is akin to, and in fact was studied in the same way as the way human children bond with their parents. And cats can experience separation anxiety in the absence of the people that they're bonded to. Cats also have some evolutionary changes as a result of co-evolving with us and domesticating themselves. One of my favorites is they have a specific vocalization called the solicitation purr. This is a special purr that has what's called a voiced component. So there's a little bit of like a squeak in that purr. They only use this purr with people, and they use it when they are most likely to use it when they want something from us, usually food. And the interesting part about that squeaky part of the is that it is at the exact same frequency as the cry of a human infant. So the theory is that they kind of hijacked our natural responsiveness to those noises in order to get us to do what they wanted in those moments. So pretty cool. Love cats. But as I said, they get this reputation for being very difficult to read, but actually they are constantly communicating. I think the easiest parts to read are their ears and their tails, but their postures, their eyes, even their whiskers tell the story too. And when you're interacting with cats, especially, it's important to note that cats may change how they're feeling about you as that interaction goes on. So they can be pretty easily overstimulated by touch compared to dogs. So a cat that is calm and relaxed and friendly after 3 pets may start to look more irritated after 4 pets. So you want to continuously monitor what that cat is telling you and respect what they're telling you and be ready to change your behavior. So ears. When the ears are looking like the Halloween cat headband ears, this is a good sign. Fully facing forward, that's generally a cat that's alert, probably interested in what's going on. They may be feeling playful or confident. As those ears start to rotate away from the front of the face towards the sides and back, that's when you enter a little riskier territory. So the ears to the side, what the internet calls airplane ears, are a sign of a cat that is starting to get irritated. They may be overstimulated, nervous, or anxious. A cat that is expressing those airplane ears should be a yellow light in terms of whether they're open to your approach or not. Once those ears have made it all the way to the back of the head, usually they're flattened against the back of the head, this is a sign, this is red light. Do not approach this cat. This is a cat that's feeling very scared, defensive, or potentially aggressive. Regardless of which end of the spectrum, it's a high level of physiological arousal, should not be approached. They also communicate a lot with their tails. So a tail that is straight up is a good sign. This usually means they're alert, interested. That upside down U that is in the photo on the slide is a sign that they're feeling playful. And also if their tail is up like that, it's a sign that they're confident. Now, I've already hopefully imposed upon you that a wagging tail in dogs does not mean they're happy. It certainly doesn't mean it's happy in cats. So a big swooshing wagging tail in cats is usually a sign of, again, increasing physiological arousal. Often it's irritation. Probably not a good idea to go to touch a cat that has a tail swishing like that. On the other hand, a tail that's quivering, so where just the base of the tail is kind of moving, it looks like they're spraying or urine marking, but nothing's coming out. That kind of quivering tail is a good sign. Cats quiver like that when they're feeling very excited. My cat Jack, who you saw a few slides ago, does that when I get home from work. He does that when I'm about to feed him his wet food or some of his favorite treats. So that quivering tail or just the tip going back and forth is good movement. Pretty much any other movement in the cat's tail, not good movement. So as the tail drops below the plane of the back, you start to get into the yellow light category. This could be potentially aggressive cat, or as it starts to get tucked closer to the body, it could be a cat that's feeling more scared or nervous. And any case, both of those categories may mean the cat will lash out or doesn't want to be petted. So probably stay away from cats with those tail positions, especially if the other body language is communicating the same thing. And then if you have a cat whose tail is puffed up, that indicates extremely high arousal. So again, the valence can change. A cat that's highly physiologically aroused can be really excited. I've seen my cat's tail get like this when he's really engaged in the toy he's playing with. Or it can be a cat that is feeling very fearful or very aggressive. So again, either end of that spectrum, when a cat is that highly excited, it's generally not a good idea to attempt to interact with them or try to handle them in any way. When it comes to their eyes, just like the dogs, you're going for loose, relaxed body language here. So eyes that are closed, partially open, or normally open, those are all okay. When you start to get tension is when it's a problem. So either the eyes squeezed really tightly shut or held really tightly open, especially if those pupils are dilated. Again, that level of tension, that pupil dilation means high arousal. Could be good, could be bad. Either way, probably not a cat that you want to touch. And then for their body as a whole, the key question is, in addition to how much tension is in their body, how much space are they taking up? So cats that are feeling very fearful or anxious will often be in a ball. They're trying to look as small as possible. They might be low to the ground. A relaxed cat is going to be taking up a lot of space. They're going to be sitting, standing, or laying down fully spread out. They are willing to, again, take up space. And then as the cat starts to appear larger than themselves by standing on their tippy toes, arching their back, that fur being puffed out again, this may also be fear or aggression, but again, probably not safe to approach. I mentioned dogs rolling onto their back and showing their bellies. Sometimes that's a request for space. Sometimes that's a request for belly rubs. Cat being on their backs also has multiple meanings. For some cats, so if that body language is relaxed, if their eyes are closed and they're on their back, that is probably a cat that trusts you. Don't know that I'd recommend going in for a belly rub in any case, but that cat being on their back can be a positive sign. Or cats on their backs can also be a cat in attack position. If you think about it, all of their pointy things are at the ready when they're on their back. So if a cat is on its back and there's a lot of tension in the body, that is a cat that is ready to attack. Definitely should not be approached. So we've got another pop quiz here. This would be a red light cat. Have a yellow light cat, those airplane ears, lots of tension in the face, low to the ground. This is a green light cat, so ears forward, whiskers fanned out, approaching the camera. This is a cat open to interaction. This I would call a yellow light cat. The ears are facing forward, but that cat is tucked into a ball. We've got some pupil dilation, eyes held really widely open, a lot of tension in the body. This is a cat that probably doesn't want to be approached. And then here is a green light cat, taking up space, ears forward, tails curving, all that good stuff. One of the most confusing things for people when it comes to cat vocalizations is the hiss. So for this video, which does have sound, this is shamelessly from my TikTok account, but I did think it was a nice example of a cat that is seemingly sending mixed signals, but is actually communicating clearly that they're not very comfortable with what's going on.
This video, tagged below, told me that she was cat-sitting Mango and hasn't had much contact with her before, which explains so much of what you are about to see. Already, the cat's body language is telling us she's feeling a little uncertain. The tail is low and the tip is twitching back and forth. She's not standing fully upright, including her head position, and her ears aren't rotated fully forward. Ultimately decides to be brave and approach, and you can see her confidence increase in the shift in her body language. That tail has gone up and she's standing a little taller. Here she sniffs the person's hand and rubs against her. This may not have been an invitation for further high-intensity petting. If you are meeting a strange cat and want to prioritize cat comfort and reduce the risk of a bite, I would advise keeping your hand still and letting the cat guide the contact you give until you learn more about that cat's preferences and comfort level. Even though Mango's body language is still uneasy, she goes in for more contact, and here is where I think she makes eye contact and hisses. Contrary to popular belief, a hiss is not an aggressive signal. Cats hiss in order to express discomfort or uncertainty over a situation, and I suspect in this case the hiss was triggered by the eye contact, which, for a mesopredator like cats, can be more threatening than the physical contact. Here, Mango creates a bit more space and has some facial tension and airplane ears happening, all of which are consistent with the message she was sending with the hiss. I'm not feeling too sure about this. Here she comes back in for contact with a lip lick that is likely serving as a displacement behavior, and again, we get a hiss that I suspect was triggered by eye contact. She goes in for another headbutt, ends up getting cheek scratches, and it's a bit much for her, which she communicates with another hiss. And then she's startled by the person's laugh, which is another indication that she's feeling on edge in this situation. She's decided it's all a bit much, and she communicates this with another hiss, a lip lick, and by creating some distance.
Okay, so that wraps up the quick primer on cat and dog communication. Got 10 minutes left. We're going to get into some more complex topics. I know I won't be able to do them justice, but at least give you a broad overview. And again, please, if you have specific questions, we can tackle them in the next
video.
So we talked about some body language that can indicate how a pet is feeling, but these are really snapshots, kind of a moment in time. There can also be larger scale behavioral changes associated with generally negative or positive emotional states too. And one study that was on dogs, but I am confident we would see something similar if we looked for this in cats, found that dogs that had experienced traumatic events, including harsh handling, domineering training, abuse, and or neglect, displayed all of these behaviors. And this list led the study author to conclude that animal abuse may lead to severe anxiety and even PTSD-like symptoms in dogs. Now, these are some sobering findings, I think, and based on the questions submitted prior to this talk, I know that many of you are seeing the outcome of this kind of trauma in the pets in your facilities. So this kind of self-destructive behavior, over-grooming, aggression, reactivity. There are also other behaviors that are also linked to stress and anxiety. Including out-of-box eliminations or house soiling, excessive barking or other vocalizations, destructive behavior, so chewing up their crate, chewing up walls, couches, all that stuff, that reactivity or aggression, excessive attention seeking, over-grooming, repetitive behavior, this is known as stereotypy, so anything that the pet or the cat or dog does over and over and over again with no apparent purpose is linked to stress and anxiety, and also just significant fear and hiding behavior. Now, I'm not denying that a lot of these behaviors can be incredibly frustrating and challenging to deal with, but the first step towards reducing these behaviors is recognizing where they're coming from. And there is so much messaging in popular culture about bad cats and dogs, and so much bad advice about how to fix these bad pets by punishing them or dominating them to show them who's boss. So I think the first step toward effectively tackling these issues may require a paradigm shift. And to that end, I think one of my peers, Dr. Zazie Todd, said it best. If you get nothing else from this talk, I want you to remember that the pets aren't being bad, they are feeling bad. So when you are coping with some of these frustrating behaviors, it's because of what they've experienced and the stress that they're currently experiencing. They're not just being bad, they are feeling bad. So what can we do about it? And I think you can order these 3 tips in order from kind of a short-term to a long-term solution. Even if you're only interacting with pets for a few hours, there are things you can do to contribute to them feeling better. And if you've got more time with them, you can work on creating more positive experiences that with repeated exposure, along with some intentional training, will add up to reframing the way the pets see the world and give them more of what's called a positive cognitive bias. Many pets who are experiencing stress or poor welfare have what's called a negative cognitive bias, meaning that if they're presented with a neutral stimulus, they assume it's going to be something bad. Over time, with the right kind of work, you can actually shift that mindset towards a positive cognitive bias. But no matter how much time you have with these pets, I'd encourage you to consider a sort of campsite rule. Ideally, you'll want to leave them better than you found them, but you certainly don't want to leave them any worse. So let's talk through these in a bit more detail, although not all of the detail, because honestly, each of these could be a full hour session in and of itself. So when it comes to helping pets feel safe now, number 1 with a bullet is giving them more control and predictability. So that will entail asking questions around what they're used to, what are they predicting is going to happen to them based on how they used to spend their day, where they were sleeping, what their feeding, walking, play schedule is, all these types of questions. For cats, they have different preferences for litter boxes, different preferences for scratching posts. So if you're trying to get them to use the litter box and not scratch up the furniture, offering them options and giving them the control and the ability to choose and tell you what they like can go a really long way. In terms of creating that routine, it can be surprising which habits are meaningful for our pets. So it can be really helpful to encourage pet owners to think like their dog or cat here. When it comes to everything meaningful being predictable, that can include short time every day for one-on-one bonding time with the pets. It can include meals, walks, potty breaks, playtime, grooming time. Again, really think like a pet. What are the and try to figure out how you can put that on a schedule. Those schedules can be temporal, meaning they happen at the same time every day, but signaled predictability can also be really powerful. So for those of you who have clients that can't do the same thing at the same time every day, if they assign a special word or noise to predict that that event is about to happen, that is just as good at making the event predictable to pets. So just being more intentional about announcing, hey, we're going to do this now, or, crinkling that treat bag before you give it to them, those kinds of things can go a long way. I also love the idea of an invisible spot. This should be an area in the home where the pet will not be bothered. You're not going to look at the pet, talk to the pet, touch the pet when they're in that spot. People ask, well, how does the pet know? They'll figure it out. If you're strict, if the whole household is strict with that spot being the invisible spot, the pet will learn. And the best invisible spot should have total freedom for the pet to come and go. So that means never locking them in and never forcing them out. You're going to want to lure them out with high value treats if you really need them to move. So crates are great for dogs. That is a good resting spot, but crates don't make a great invisible spot if the dog is ever going to be locked in. And for those resting spots, cats, because they're mesopredators, really benefit from an actual hiding place. Also, like high surfaces like kitchen counters. But I'm a big fan of crates for dogs, as long as they're appropriately introduced to them and trained correctly. I also recommend consent checks for interaction. So just going through and learning that body language and ensuring that the cat or dog actually wants to be interacted with. It's okay that not every cat or dog enjoys attention from strangers. So let go of the assumption that it is mean or inappropriate to ignore a pet. This seems to be an especially pervasive problem for people with dogs. If your staff are nervous about interacting with pets, they do not need to interact with them. That is okay by the dogs and the cats. You don't need to look at them or talk to them or get anywhere near them. It's also important to try to make plans to reduce visual and auditory stress through design where you can. Calming music or something called brown noise can be really good for auditory stressors. And then there are some pheromones, synthetic pheromones, Adaptil for dogs, Feel Away for cats, that can have big impacts for some animals. Again, these should be monitored. It's not going to work for everybody, but it could be worth a try for some really stressed pets. And then it's always a good idea to rule out any medical causes for some of these serious behavior problems, and potentially get the pet on some sort of anti-anxiety medication. However, none of these interventions, so the sprays and plugins, the pharmacological medications, none of that is going to work in isolation. The goal is for these things to reduce the pet's anxiety so that the work can be done, so that they're under threshold and open to learning that the world is a safe place. There's no such thing as a silver bullet when it comes to behavior modification. So the second step is to create positive experiences. Dogs, big one is giving them opportunities to use their noses. Cats, I think the easiest way to win here is to give them more playtime. I'm a big fan of these particular little worm toys. I've never had a cat that didn't go crazy over them. I'm not a fan of laser pointers because cats can get frustrated if they don't have the opportunity to catch something. But you can use them as long as you give them a treat or a toy to play with at the end. Some of these items might make good items for welcome kits for pets. And positive reinforcement is also a great tool. This teaches pets that their behavior can make good things happen. They can do stuff and get a treat. It's great for bonding with the pet parent. Just a big fan of positive reinforcement training. And then Purina has an app, the My Purina app, that has a happy experience within it that has ideas for 5 to 10 minute activities every day to improve the bond with the pet and enrich the pet big fan. I helped develop this with my amazing colleague, Alex Johnson. This is a great free way to bond with pets as well. And then finally, shifting towards a more positive bias. We are constantly communicating with our pets. They are always learning from us, whether we're training or not. So shifting your own habits to ensure that we're consistent and clear in what we're communicating with them and aren't accidentally reinforcing some of the behaviors we'd actually like to extinguish. Desensitization and counter conditioning is an incredibly valuable tool. Obviously don't have time to go through it today, but I think this would be a good topic for the next session maybe. So let me know if you're interested in that. And then ad hoc counter conditioning, just pairing positive experiences with stuff that gets the pets stressed out. There's a lot of scientific evidence that this does a lot for reducing pet anxiety too. So sorry I don't have time to go through it, but at least you know the kinds of stuff to Google now. So thank you guys so much. Sorry that I took it all the way to the end. I'm happy to stay on a little later if there are any questions. You can learn a lot more about pets on my social channels. And you're free to reach out to me via email if you have anything else I can help with.
Thank you so much, Dr. Annie. That was such a fantastic presentation. I have worked in animal welfare for a decade, and I learned new things from this presentation. So really, really, really wonderful job. And I'm sure this will be a popular webinar for folks to come back to in the future. It will, once we have sort of the recording all trimmed, it will live in our video library, and I think will be a wonderful asset for folks to return to when they need to brush up on their animal body language and animal behavior skills. For those of you that have some time and would like to stick around, we are going to do the Q&A session with Dr. Annie. We're going to go ahead and get started with a handful of questions that were submitted by folks in the registration form. But please feel free if there are additional questions that you have that didn't get answered today, or questions that popped into your head as Dr. Annie was presenting, please feel free to enter those in the chat. But to get started, number one, this is a tricky one, and I'm sure it does not have a simple singular answer, Dr. Annie, but how long does it typically take for a pet to recover from trauma was one of the questions that was submitted during the registration process.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right that there is not one size fits all answer. I think the most important thing when it comes to navigating helping pets through their trauma is that it has to occur at the pet's pace. And so taking steps to try to rush the process is actually going to do a lot more harm than just not doing anything at all. So as you try to get pets through this, patience is super important. For some cats and dogs, they will turn around so quickly you won't believe it's the same animal just a few days later. For others, that can look more like months to years, and they may never get to where you think they should be. But it just is important that it happens on the pet's time scale.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next question. This was an interesting one. Do pets of different ages have different body language cues?
So yeah, that is an interesting question. In general, the body language that I've talked about is consistent for all pets, all breeds, all ages, all sizes. That said, pets, but I like this question because I think it's a good reminder not to get complacent, even with a pet that you know really well. The stuff that they tolerated when they were younger may change as their senses change, their hearing and sight will be diminished. They might be experiencing some pain due to arthritis or other medical concerns as they get older. And so even though you know that you know your dog and cat and you think you know their body language, it's just a good reminder to continue to check in and make sure that you still understand where their baseline is and that you're still assessing, are they enjoying this or not?
Awesome. I love that. Next question is about crate training. It's a rather nebulous one, but how do you crate train a pet? I know from speaking to a lot of domestic violence shelters and homeless shelters that there is a strong desire to be able to crate pets, especially when they're in shelter or maybe even in a shared room with other clients. How do you start that process of crate training a pet?
So that could be its own session. I think the key issue is to keep it a positive experience for the pet. And if you have the time, which I know a lot of folks don't have, but to go at the pet's pace, that's really important. You don't want to risk creating a negative experience with the crate. That's going to make it a much more steep hill to climb to ultimately get to the end goal of the training. So I'd be happy to go over this in a future session, but I think that I think it's clickertraining.com. It's Karen Pryor's website, is an outstanding resource for lots of training related questions, but I think she has a particularly good how-to for crate training. So I would recommend checking that website if you need the answer today.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So last question that was submitted during our registration process that we didn't get to cover in your presentation was about kind of how to build staff and maybe resident buy-in for a pet program. Specifically, this person would like to have their shelter be pet friendly, but there's some hesitancy with maybe some staff members and other residents. How can we convince residents and staff that most dogs do not bite unprovoked?
Yeah, that is a great point. Dogs and cats are certainly not biting without warning. Of course, occasionally that kind of thing will happen, but the vast majority of dog bites happen when the person and cat bites as well. There are specific things that people do that make them more likely to be bitten by a cat or a dog. So it is wholly under the control of the people interacting with the pets. And then their cats and dogs, because they've been domesticated, are so tolerant of us. They put up with a lot. They give so many warnings before they actually escalate to a bite. And once you know to look for it, you will not be able to stop seeing all of the videos of dogs, especially that are very comfortable with children and they're still not biting. So I think just providing the actual science and data showing that, hey, this actually isn't happening very often. There's things people can do to reduce the bites. There's things we can do and that the pets are warning us and we can pay attention to those. And so I think knowledge is really power here, and just trying to get the facts out there and making sure that the people that are worried about it have the knowledge that they need to know that they could intervene appropriately and stave off these kinds of issues at their facilities.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Now moving on to some questions that were submitted in the chat. The first one that I see here is from Sherry. Sherry says, my daughter's dog was present when she was seriously assaulted, and now the behaviors of that dog are different. The dog no longer allows strangers to approach, is very on alert in public, etc. Can you recommend a place that I could learn more on helping the dog feel safe, and specifically feel safe in public?
Yeah, so two things. I'll provide an answer with one of my favorite resources, but I do think we put a lot of pressure on dogs to be a certain kind of dog. And I get it. My dog is not a dog that's very friendly with other people. And that is not the kind of dog I wanted. And I've just had to accept that this isn't the dog that's going to be lounging at my feet while I sip a latte on a patio, or she's not a dog that enjoys going to dog parks or anything like that. So I think for a lot of these behavior problems, part of it is going to be on us to adjust our expectations. It is okay if the dog does not want to be greeted by people in public, assuming that she's not experiencing high levels of fear or anxiety in other areas of her life. Like, we should allow dogs and cats to have those boundaries. That said, if you are interested in trying to improve her confidence, I think a lot of the tips that I shared very quickly today are the same thing. So looking up that desensitization and counter conditioning protocol, finding a credentialed behaviorist or trainer that has experience using positive techniques to help with the desensitization and counter conditioning can go a long way. And then the woman I mentioned who gave the quote, "Your pet isn't being bad, they're feeling bad," Dr. Zazie Todd, has a book out called Bark, all about anxious and reactive dogs. It's a book, so it's a commitment, but I thought it was extremely well written, easy to read, and she has a lot of science in there and very practical tips for how to reduce anxiety. So I would highly recommend that as a resource.
That's great. Thank you so much. One more question that I saw here. This is about pet loss and separation anxiety, but I imagine it could apply pretty broadly to separation anxiety and home alone anxiety. I lost a dog a month ago. My surviving dog is having difficulty and is showing signs of separation anxiety. Do you have any resources that we could use?
So unfortunately, this particular topic of changes in behavior after the loss of another pet or human companion in the home is very understudied. The few studies that have been done support what most pet owners already know, which is that our pets do experience behavioral changes consistent with grief following the loss of a bonded pet. Um, there hasn't been any work specifically on how to help them through that grief, but just know that this is normal. A month is actually a pretty short time frame, so I would expect that you'll continue to see that behavior moving back towards their normal as time continues to pass, maybe another month or two until they're closer to back to normal. But I think that the best way to try to cope with this is to think like your dog and figure out what role the pet that you lost was playing in that dog's life. So what needs were being met by that dog that there's now a vacuum, and is there anything you can do to help meet those needs? So if you can give them more playtime, more focused attention from you, if they were getting a lot of social play from that other dog, do you have friends that have compatible dogs you could make more of an effort to do play dates with? So again, just try to think like your dog, figure out what specific things they are missing from the presence of that companion, and try to fill in the gaps where you can.
Wonderful answer. Thank you, Annie. I think last question that I see, at least in our chat, comes from Nancy. And I'm going to kind of pare it down and paraphrase it a bit, Nancy. But I think in essence, the question is about cats and whether or not cats can develop health conditions as a result of stress.
Yes. Now, I'm not a vet, so I can't speak to the health side, but from the behavioral side, absolutely. So I mentioned earlier that because of how they evolved, they are very sensitive to stress as it impacts their litter box use and also their feeding behavior. And so if a cat is stressed enough that they are not eating properly, they're going to get sick. And if a cat is stressed enough that they're not eliminating properly, if they start holding their urine, for example, or if they're gut health changes and they start to have it starts uncomfortable going to the bathroom, their litter box use is going to change. So absolutely, it is a loop. Their health issues can significantly affect their behavior, and their behavior issues can significantly impact their health. So your vet is going to be the best partner for helping you get through those challenges.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Well, we're about 11 minutes past the hour, and we're so thankful to all of you who could stay with us on the call a little bit longer. Dr. Annie, I just wanted to share the many, many messages that we're receiving in the chat, just telling you thank you and how excellent the presentation was and how much it was enjoyed by our audience. Also, some calls from people who would love to hear from you again. So folks, you will be receiving an email from us later today or tomorrow. And in that email, you will have a link to an evaluation form for today's guest presentation. Part of that form will ask you an open-ended question about what types of topics you'd like to hear about in the future. So I know there were many areas of Dr. Annie's presentation today that she didn't get to fully expand on. So if you would like to hear about one or two or three of those areas in a future presentation, please include that in your evaluation so we can invite her back, because we would also love to have her again. Lots more thank yous, Dr. Annie, coming through the chat, and just a sincere thank you from me and Tia and everybody at Don't Forget the Pets. We are so happy to be able to have you today. And I know this is a topic that really has the potential to help a lot of human service providers feel more comfortable having pets in their facilities and being around pets. Really, knowledge is power. And so we thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
All right, everyone. Well, look out for an email from us and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.